Bullied teen saves drowning child, unaware the parents are secretly millionaires who will change her life. These words haunted Ellie Morgan's dreams like a promise she couldn't believe, a headline from some parallel universe where her life actually mattered. But in this reality, she was just a 17-year-old girl with fading bruises on her arms and a lunchtime routine of hiding in the library's forgotten corner. The late October rain pelted her bedroom window, nature's quiet metronome counting down the minutes until she'd have to face Westlake High again. 673 days left until graduation. 673 days of sidelong glances, of accidentally knocked down books, of whispers that followed her like shadows. Ellie traced her finger along the fog-kissed glass, drawing an escape route to nowhere. Dad would be at work already, double shifts at the factory since Mom left 3 years ago. The empty house creaked around her, a hollow companion. Her phone buzzed. A new Instagram post from Madison Chen, a group photo from yesterday's party. Everyone smiling, arms intertwined in easy friendship. A party Ellie hadn't known about until now. Her chest tightened as she scrolled through the comments. Each cheerful emoji another tiny needle. Just breathe, just breathe, just breathe. She pulled her dark hair into a messy bun, her fingers catching on yesterday's knots. The mirror reflected what she expected: pale skin, shadows beneath gray eyes that had forgotten how to sparkle. She forced her lips into what resembled a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. It never did anymore. Her worn backpack waited by the door, heavy with textbooks and unfinished sketches, drawings she'd never show anyone. Art was the one place she still existed fully, the only space where she felt real. The margins of her notebooks bloomed with intricate patterns and faceless figures caught in moments of impossible joy. The walk to school was 1 mile of rolling coastal Maine landscape, beautiful in a way that made her heart ache. On good days, Ellie pretended she was walking through one of her own drawings, somewhere magical where her footsteps made the earth remember her. Today wasn't a good day. "Hey, Trash Morgan!" The voice cut through the morning mist before she'd even reached the school parking lot. Tyler Simmons, varsity jacket, perfect teeth, and a talent for finding exactly where she was most vulnerable. He'd been her friend once, back in elementary school when the world was simpler. Now he was Madison's boyfriend and the architect of Ellie's daily misery. "Heard you weren't invited again," he called out, a few of his friends chuckling behind him. "Must suck being such a nobody." Ellie kept walking, eyes fixed on the cracked sidewalk, counting each step. 27, 28. A foot appeared in her path, deliberate, waiting. She tried to sidestep but stumbled, her backpack sliding off her shoulder as she caught herself on the rough pavement. Her sketchbook fell open, pages fluttering in the damp breeze. "Oops," Tyler said, mock concern dripping from his voice. "So clumsy." Laughter rippled through the small crowd as Ellie scrambled to gather her scattered drawings. A sneaker pressed down on one page, a detailed sketch of a lighthouse surrounded by swirling waves, hours of careful work. "Please," she whispered, hating the tremor in her voice. "Don't." Tyler lifted his foot, revealing the smudged, dirt-streaked image. "You know, nobody cares about your weird little pictures, Morgan. Nobody cares about you." The bell rang, saving her from whatever came next. The group drifted toward the school entrance, leaving Ellie kneeling on the wet ground, carefully placing her damaged artwork back into her bag. Something hot and tight burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let tears fall. Not here, not where they could see. The school day passed in a blur of avoiding eye contact and silent note-taking. In AP English, Ms. Ramirez asked her to analyze a passage from The Great Gatsby, and for 2 blessed minutes, Ellie's voice filled the room with thoughts about dreams and disillusionment. She felt Tyler watching her, waiting for her to stumble over her words. But she didn't. Small victories. When the final bell rang, Ellie didn't head home. Instead, she walked toward Crescent Bay, a small secluded beach 3 miles from town. Few people visited this time of year, too cold, too windy for casual beachgoers. Perfect for someone who needed to disappear for a while. The shoreline welcomed her with its familiar symphony, waves crashing, gulls crying, wind whistling through beach grass. Ellie dropped her backpack on a driftwood log and pulled out her sketchbook, turning to a fresh page. The lighthouse stood in the distance, exactly as she'd drawn it that morning before Tyler's shoe had marred the image. She would draw it again, better, stronger. The pencil moved across the paper with purpose, her breathing slowing to match the rhythm of the waves. This was her true self, the girl who could create worlds with graphite and paper. not the shadow who walked the halls of Westlake High. Time slipped away as the lighthouse took shape under her hands. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. She was so absorbed that she almost missed the sound, faint at first, then unmistakable, a child's scream. Ellie's head snapped up, pencil frozen mid-stroke. There, perhaps 50 yards down the beach, a small figure thrashed in the water. The current at Crescent Bay was notoriously treacherous, with a sudden drop-off that had claimed lives before. Without thinking, Ellie dropped her sketchbook and ran. Her feet pounded across the wet sand, heart hammering against her ribs. The child, a little girl with dark pigtails, was being pulled farther from shore with each desperate splash. "Help!" The word was half swallowed by a wave, tiny hands reaching toward the sky. Ellie kicked off her shoes and waded in, gasping as the October cold Atlantic hit her skin. She'd grown up swimming in these waters, but never this late in the season, never when the currents ran this strong. The cold seeped into her bones as she pushed forward, fighting against the pull of the receding tide. "I'm coming!" she called. "Try to float on your back." The little girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. Her face was a mask of terror, eyes wide as she struggled to keep her head above water. Another wave crashed over her, and she disappeared momentarily from view. Ellie's heart stopped. "Please, please, please." The dark pigtails reappeared, and Ellie pushed harder, her muscles screaming in protest as she swam toward the child. The current tugged at her legs, trying to drag her sideways, away from the drowning girl. She resisted, focusing on the small face that bobbed in and out of sight. "Almost there," Ellie gasped, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the child or herself. "Almost there." When she finally reached the girl, Ellie wrapped one arm around the small, trembling body. "I've got you," she said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. "I've got you now." The child clung to her, small fingers digging into Ellie's shoulders with surprising strength. I can't, she sputtered, water streaming down her face. "You don't have to," Ellie assured her. "Just hold on to me." Swimming back to shore with one arm while supporting a panicked child with the other was nothing like the life-saving drills she'd learned in summer camp years ago. Each yard was a battle against the sea's unrelenting grip. Ellie's limbs grew heavier, her breathing more labored, but she kept going. The weight of the child, the drag of her soaked clothes, the burning in her lungs, all of it faded beneath a single determined thought. Not today. You don't get her today. When her feet finally touched sand, Ellie nearly sobbed with relief. She half walked, half stumbled toward the beach, the little girl still clutched against her chest. As they emerged from the water, Ellie's legs gave way, and they collapsed onto the wet sand together. "Lucy! Lucy!" A woman's voice, raw with fear, cut through the sound of the waves. A couple ran toward them across the beach, the woman in front, her face etched with terror, a man following close behind. "Mommy!" The little girl, Lucy, cried, scrambling up from beside Ellie. The woman fell to her knees, gathering her daughter into a fierce embrace. "Oh God, Lucy, we told you to stay where we could see you." Her voice broke, dissolving into murmured endearments as she rocked the child back and forth. The man reached them seconds later, dropping to the sand beside his family. His face was ashen, eyes wild with the particular horror of a parent who has nearly lost everything. He wrapped his arms around both his wife and daughter, creating a circle of relief and gratitude. Ellie sat motionless, water streaming from her clothes, her body beginning to shake with cold and adrenaline. She felt invisible again, as she always was, until the man looked up and saw her. "You saved her," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved our daughter." Before Ellie could respond, a violent shiver ran through her body. The woman noticed, immediately shifting into action. "You're freezing," she said, shrugging off her expensive-looking cashmere coat and wrapping it around Ellie's shoulders. The sudden warmth was shocking against Ellie's ice-cold skin. "We need to get you warm." "I'm okay," Ellie managed, teeth chattering. "Just need to catch my breath." "I'm Robert Wells," the man said, extending his hand. "This is my wife, Catherine, and our daughter, Lucy, who you just rescued from the ocean." His grip was firm, grateful. "We owe you everything." Robert Wells. The name tickled something in Ellie's memory, but she was too cold, too exhausted to place it. "Ellie Morgan," she replied, her voice small against the vast emptiness of the beach. Lucy, still wrapped in her mother's arms, peered at Ellie with wide, solemn eyes. "You flew?" she said suddenly. "In the water," like a superhero. Despite everything, the cold, the fear, the lingering adrenaline, Ellie felt a genuine smile tug at her lips. "Not quite flying," she said, "just swimming." "We need to get both of you warm and dry," Catherine said, practical concern overriding emotion. "Our rental house is just up those stairs. Please come with us." Ellie hesitated, suddenly aware of her dripping clothes, her tangled hair, her general dishevelment. These people were clearly wealthy. Catherine's cashmere coat probably cost more than Ellie's entire wardrobe. The rental house she pointed to was one of the exclusive cliffside properties that rented for thousands per week. "I should probably just head home," Ellie said, though the thought of the 3-mile walk in wet clothes made her shiver again. Robert shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. You're coming with us. Hot shower, dry clothes, and I'm calling a doctor to check you both out." "That's really not—" "Please," Catherine interrupted, her eyes meeting Ellie's. There was something in her gaze, a rawness, a vulnerability that cut through Ellie's resistance. "You saved our child. Let us at least make sure you don't catch pneumonia." And so Ellie found herself walking up the weathered wooden steps to the clifftop house, Catherine's arm around her shoulders, Robert carrying Lucy, who kept turning to look back at Ellie with something like wonder in her eyes. The rental house was even more impressive up close, a sprawling cedar-shingled structure with walls of glass facing the ocean. Inside, the space opened into an airy great room with vaulted ceilings and a massive stone fireplace. Modern furniture in muted blues and grays complemented the coastal palette outside the windows. "The guest bathroom is through there," Catherine said, pointing toward a hallway. "Towels in the cabinet, and I'll bring you some dry clothes." "Thank you," Ellie said, suddenly shy in these unfamiliar surroundings. She clutched the cashmere coat closer, acutely aware of the puddle forming at her feet on the pristine hardwood floor. 20 minutes later, showered and dressed in borrowed clothes, soft gray yoga pants and a blue cashmere sweater that felt like a cloud against her skin, Ellie padded back to the great room. A fire now crackled in the fireplace, and Robert stood at a sleek kitchen island, speaking quietly on his phone. "Yes, doctor. Winters, both of them. I know it's your day off, but thank you. We appreciate it." He ended the call and turned to Ellie. "Doctor's on his way." "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you," she said, and it was true. The hot water had chased away the bone-deep chill, and the borrowed clothes wrapped her in unexpected comfort. "But I really don't need a doctor." "Humor me," Robert said with a gentle smile. "Lucy's resting in her room. Catherine's with her now." Ellie nodded, moving closer to the fire, drawn to its warmth. Her gaze wandered to the large windows where darkness had begun to fall. With a jolt, she remembered her backpack, her sketchbook, left behind on the beach in her rush to reach Lucy. "My things," she said, turning to Robert. "I left my backpack on the beach." "I'll get someone to look for it first thing in the morning," he promised. "It's too dark now." Ellie's stomach sank. Her homework, her textbooks, but most importantly, her drawings, all possibly washed away by the tide or ruined by the elements. She'd lost so much that mattered to her already. The thought of losing her art, too, made her throat tighten painfully. "It's just, my sketchbook was in there." Something in her voice must have conveyed the importance, because Robert's expression softened with understanding. "I'm sorry, Ellie. We'll do everything we can to find it." Catherine appeared from the hallway, looking tired but composed. "Lucy's finally asleep," she said. "The doctor will want to wake her for an examination, but I thought she should rest a bit first." She crossed to Ellie, taking her hands. "I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't been there, anyone would have done the same," Ellie murmured, uncomfortable with the gratitude shining in the woman's eyes. "No," Catherine said firmly. "They wouldn't have. It takes extraordinary courage to do what you did." She squeezed Ellie's hands once before releasing them. "Are you hungry? I can make you something to eat while we wait for the doctor." Ellie realized suddenly that she was starving. "That would be nice, thank you." While Catherine moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, Ellie found herself studying the family photos displayed on a side table, Lucy on a pony, the three of them in front of the Eiffel Tower, Robert in a tuxedo at what appeared to be a charity gala, a life so different from her own that it might as well have been from another planet. "That was last year's Children's Hospital benefit," Robert said, noticing her gaze. "Raised $8 million for the new oncology wing." Ellie nodded, not knowing what to say. Her father had been laid off twice in the past 3 years. Their idea of charity was dropping spare change into the Salvation Army bucket at Christmas. "Do you live in Crescent Bay?" Robert asked, changing the subject. Yes, all my life, Ellie replied. My dad works at the Harborview manufacturing plant. Or did. They downsized last month. The words slipped out before she could stop them. She hadn't meant to reveal so much to these strangers. Robert and Catherine exchanged a look Ellie couldn't interpret. And your mother? Catherine asked gently, setting a mug of steaming hot chocolate in front of Ellie. She left. 3 years ago. Ellie wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Florida, last we heard. Another look passed between husband and wife, a silent communication born of years together. You're in high school? Robert asked. Senior year at Westlake. Do you enjoy it? Ellie's laugh came out sharper than she intended. Not particularly. Before they could ask more questions, the doorbell rang. Dr. Winters, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, examined both Lucy and Ellie, pronouncing them both remarkably well considering their ordeal. Lucy had swallowed some seawater but showed no signs of secondary drowning. Ellie had mild hypothermia that was already resolving thanks to the hot shower and warm clothes. You were very lucky, Doctor, Winters told them as she packed up her bag. The currents at Crescent Bay have taken strong swimmers before. She turned to Ellie. What you did was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous. I didn't really think about it, Ellie admitted. I just acted. That's what heroes do, the doctor said with a smile. After Dr. Winters left, Robert insisted on driving Ellie home despite her protests that she could walk. The ride passed mostly in silence, Ellie giving quiet directions through the increasingly modest neighborhoods until they reached the small Cape Cod-style house where she lived with her father. Thank you for everything, she said, hand on the door handle of Robert's luxury SUV. I hope Lucy feels better tomorrow. Ellie, Robert said, stopping her before she could exit. We're staying in Crescent Bay for the next month while our Boston home is being renovated. We'd like to have you over for dinner tomorrow if you're free. Lucy would love to see you again. The invitation surprised her. That's very kind, but please, he said. It would mean a lot to us. Something in his expression, an earnestness, a genuine desire to connect, made Ellie nod. Okay, thank you. Great. I'll send a car for you around 6? A car. Of course these people would send a car, rather than expecting her to make her own way there. Ellie managed to smile. That would be fine. As she watched Robert's taillights disappear down the street, Ellie felt oddly dislocated, as if the day's events had somehow shifted her into a slightly different version of her life. She fished her house key from the pocket of Catherine's expensive yoga pants, which she'd have to return tomorrow, and let herself into the dark, empty house. Her father wouldn't be home for hours yet. The silence wrapped around her like an old familiar blanket, not exactly comforting but known. Ellie moved through the rooms, turning on lights, trying to dispel the strange feeling that she was a visitor in her own home. In her bedroom, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror, Catherine's blue cashmere sweater, her hair still damp from the shower, her face flushed with lingering warmth from the fire. For a brief moment, she looked like someone else. Someone who belonged in that clifftop house with its ocean views and family photos. The illusion vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Tomorrow she would return to being Ellie Morgan, the girl nobody saw, the girl whose sketchbook was probably floating somewhere in the Atlantic by now, whose only friend was the silence of an empty house. But for tonight, just tonight, she would hold on to the feeling of Lucy's small fingers gripping her shoulders, of Catherine's coat wrapped around her shivering body, of Robert's quiet, "What you did was incredibly brave." For tonight, she would allow herself to believe it might be true. Morning arrived with a tentative knock on Ellie's bedroom door. She blinked awake, disoriented, fragments of dreams still clinging to her consciousness. Water, cold, a small hand reaching toward the sky. Ellie? Her father's voice unusually hesitant. You awake, kiddo? She sat up, pushing tangled hair from her face. Yeah, Dad. Come in. The door opened to reveal Michael Morgan, still in his work clothes from the night shift, his face etched with concern. At 45, he looked a decade older. Years of physical labor and quiet grief had carved permanent lines around his eyes and mouth. But his smile, when it appeared, still transformed his face with an echo of the man he'd been before Ellie's mother left. There's someone here to see you, he said. A Mr. Wells? Says you rescued his daughter yesterday. The events of the previous day rushed back in vivid detail. Robert's here? Now? Her father nodded, clearly bemused. In our living room. With a very nice leather bag he says belongs to you. Ellie scrambled out of bed. My backpack? He found it? Seems so. Want to come say hello? He's been very enthusiastic about singing your praises. 5 minutes later, hastily dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, Ellie entered the living room to find Robert Wells standing awkwardly by their worn couch, holding her backpack. He looked even more out of place in daylight, his casual clothes still obviously expensive, his presence filling their modest living room with an energy that seemed too big for the space. "Ellie," he said, his face brightening. "Good morning. I hope it's not too early." "It's fine," she assured him, eyes fixed on the backpack. "You found it. My assistant drove down at first light," Robert explained, handing her the bag. The tide hadn't reached it yet. Everything should be intact. Ellie unzipped the main compartment with trembling fingers. There, nestled between textbooks, was her sketchbook, dry, undamaged, waiting. Relief washed over her so intensely that she had to blink back sudden tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Robert watched her reaction with something like understanding in his eyes. "Your father was just telling me you're quite the artist." Ellie glanced at her dad, surprised. He shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I may have mentioned your drawings once or twice. Lucy's been asking for you all morning," Robert continued. "She's convinced you're some kind of ocean goddess." His laugh was warm, genuine. "We're still on for dinner tonight, I hope?" Ellie nodded, suddenly aware of her father's curious gaze. "Yes, thank you." "Excellent. Car will be here at 6. Robert turned to Michael, extending his hand. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Morgan. You've raised an extraordinary young woman." After Robert left, Ellie faced her father's raised eyebrows and crossed arms. "So," he said, "want to tell me about yesterday?" Over coffee and toast, Ellie recounted the events at Crescent Bay, the drowning child, the rescue, the family's kindness afterward. She downplayed the danger, emphasized the doctor's clean bill of health, and tried to make the whole thing sound like far less of a big deal than Robert clearly thought it was. Her father listened silently, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug, eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You could have died," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "Dad?" "No, let me finish." He set down his mug carefully. "You could have died, and that terrifies me." "But what you did," his voice caught. "Your mother leaving, the factory layoffs, all the ways I've let you down. Sometimes I wonder what I've done right in this life. And then you go and do something like this, and I think maybe, just maybe, I didn't mess everything up." "Dad," Ellie said again, softer this time, "you haven't let me down." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand once, quickly, before standing to rinse his mug in the sink. Michael Morgan had never been comfortable with emotional conversations. That brief touch, those few sentences, were the equivalent of a lengthy heart-to-heart from anyone else. "These Wells people," he said, changing the subject. "They seem pretty well off." "Yeah," Ellie agreed. "I think they're from Boston, just renting here for a while. Rich folks." Her father mused, not unkindly. "Different world." Different world indeed, Ellie thought as she prepared for school. A world where people sent assistants to retrieve forgotten backpacks, where cashmere sweaters were everyday attire, where sending a car was a casual offer. A world that would intersect briefly with hers before continuing on its separate, privileged trajectory. School passed in its usual blur of avoidance strategies and quiet note-taking. Tyler seemed subdued today, and Madison merely glanced at her rather than delivering the usual cutting remark. Perhaps they sensed something different about her, some invisible barrier that yesterday's events had placed between Ellie and their capacity to hurt her. Or perhaps it was just a temporary reprieve, the random kindness of the universe offering a single peaceful day. Either way, Ellie accepted it gratefully, using her lunch period to hide in her usual library corner and open her rescued sketchbook. The lighthouse drawing was still there, incomplete but undamaged. She ran her fingers over the pencil lines, remembering how quickly she'd abandoned it at the sound of Lucy's scream. With the time remaining, she turned to a fresh page and began a new drawing, a small figure in water, a larger one swimming toward her, waves curling around them both. The memory was still so vivid that her hand moved almost of its own accord, capturing the moment with swift, sure strokes. "That's really good." The voice startled her. Madison Chen stood by her table, designer backpack slung over one shoulder, watching Ellie draw with an expression that wasn't entirely hostile. "Thanks," Ellie said cautiously, waiting for the insult that would inevitably follow. but Madison just nodded, hesitated as if she might say something else, then turned and walked away, leaving Ellie staring after her in confusion. The remainder of the day passed without incident, and by the time Ellie arrived home, she had almost convinced herself that yesterday's rescue had somehow altered the fundamental laws of her universe, that perhaps saving a child had earned her a reprieve from the daily torments of high school. At precisely 6 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up in front of her house. The driver, a professional-looking woman in a dark suit, introduced herself as Diane and held the door open with a polite smile. "Ms. Wells is looking forward to seeing you again," she said as Ellie slid into the back seat, clutching a small gift bag containing Catherine's borrowed clothes, freshly washed and folded. The clifftop house looked even more impressive in daylight. Glass and cedar gleamed in the late afternoon sun, the structure seeming to grow organically from the rocky coastline. As Diane escorted her to the front door, Ellie fought the urge to turn and run back to the familiar confines of her own small world. Before they reached the entrance, the door flew open and Lucy burst out, pigtails bouncing, face alight with excitement. "Ellie, you came!" she cried, launching herself forward to wrap small arms around Ellie's waist. "I told Mommy and Daddy you would come." The child's unbridled enthusiasm melted something in Ellie's chest. She found herself smiling genuinely as she returned the hug. "Of course I came. I wanted to see how you're doing." "I'm perfect," Lucy declared, grabbing Ellie's hand and tugging her inside. "Come see my shell collection. I found the best one today. It's pink and swirly, and Daddy says it's called a Wenteltrap, which is the silliest name ever." Catherine appeared in the entryway, looking elegant yet casual in slim pants and a silk blouse. "Lucy, let Ellie breathe," she said with an indulgent smile. "She just arrived." "But Mommy, I have to show her my shells and my books and my special rocks and—" "And you will," Catherine promised, after Ellie has had a chance to say hello and get comfortable. She turned to Ellie with a warm smile. "It's wonderful to see you again. How are you feeling today?" "Much better, thank you," Ellie replied, holding out the gift bag. "I brought back your clothes. Thank you for lending them to me." Catherine waved away the bag with a gracious gesture. "Keep them. They look better on you anyway." Before Ellie could protest, she continued, "Robert's on a conference call that's running long, but he'll join us soon. In the meantime, would you like a tour? Lucy's been practicing her tour guide skills all afternoon." Lucy bounced on her toes, face hopeful. "Please? I'm very good at showing people things." And so Ellie found herself being led through the spectacular house by an enthusiastic 6-year-old who took her role as tour guide very seriously. Each room was introduced with a flourish. "This is the sunny room where Mommy reads her books." Each feature pointed out with pride, "This fireplace is made of rocks from the actual beach." The tour ended in Lucy's bedroom, a charming space with ocean-themed decor and bookshelves overflowing with children's literature. True to her word, Lucy immediately began showing Ellie her prized collections: shells arranged by size and color, smooth stones from various beaches around the world, small figurines of sea creatures. "And this," Lucy said, lifting a somewhat battered plush dolphin from her pillow, "is Splash. He's my oldest friend." She hugged the stuffed animal close. "He was scared yesterday when I was in the water. He thought I might not come back." The simple statement hit Ellie with unexpected force. Lucy had been truly terrified yesterday, had faced death in a way no 6-year-old should have to experience. Yet here she was, resilient and joyful, matter-of-factly acknowledging her fear through the proxy of a stuffed dolphin. "I bet Splash was very happy when you came home safe," Ellie said softly. Lucy nodded solemnly. "He said you're his hero too." She held out the dolphin. "Do you want to hold him? He gives the best hugs when you're sad." "I'm not sad," Ellie protested, even as she gently accepted the offered toy. Lucy tilted her head, studying Ellie with disconcerting perception. "Your eyes are sad sometimes, like Daddy's eyes after Grandma died." Before Ellie could formulate a response to this surprisingly astute observation, Catherine appeared in the doorway. "Dinner's ready, you two. Lucy, wash your hands, please." Dinner was served in the open dining area adjacent to the kitchen, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the darkening ocean. Robert had emerged from his office call and greeted Ellie with genuine warmth. The table was set with casual elegance, beautiful dishes, fresh flowers, but nothing overly formal. The conversation flowed more easily than Ellie had expected. Robert asked about her classes, expressing particular interest when she mentioned her AP art portfolio. Catherine shared stories from her work as an architectural preservationist, while Lucy contributed enthusiastic, if somewhat tangential, anecdotes about everything from her first-grade teacher to the family's cat back in Boston. "Ellie saved a bird once," Lucy announced as they finished the main course, a delicious pasta dish that Catherine had prepared herself before she saved me. 3 pairs of eyes turned to Ellie questioningly. "It was just a sparrow," she explained, somewhat embarrassed by the attention. "It flew into our kitchen window last spring. I kept it in a shoebox until it recovered, then let it go." "She's a superhero," Lucy declared with absolute conviction. "Like in my books." "Speaking of books," Catherine said, smoothly changing the subject, "Lucy tells me you're quite the artist, Ellie. Would you be willing to show us some of your work?" Ellie hesitated. Her drawings were private, windows into her inner world that she rarely shared with anyone. But there was something about this family, about the genuine interest in their eyes, that made her usual barriers seem unnecessary. "I have my sketchbook with me," she admitted. "I could show you a few things after dinner." Lucy clapped her hands in delight. "Yes, Ellie drawings!" Later, seated in the comfortable living room with Lucy pressed against her side, Ellie slowly turned the pages of her sketchbook. Catherine and Robert leaned forward, examining each drawing with genuine appreciation. The lighthouse, the series of wave studies, the portraits of strangers glimpsed in town, the fantastical landscapes that existed only in Ellie's imagination. "These are extraordinary," Robert said quietly when she reached the end. "You have remarkable talent. The composition in this one is particularly striking," Catherine added, pointing to a drawing of an elderly man feeding seagulls on the pier. "You've captured such dignity in his posture." "I like the mermaid one best," Lucy declared, pointing to a whimsical sketch Ellie had done of a young girl with a fishtail swimming among curious sea creatures. "Thank you," Ellie said, warmth spreading through her chest at their genuine admiration. When was the last time anyone had really looked at her work? Her father tried, but he didn't have the vocabulary or background to offer specific feedback. Her art teacher was encouraging but overworked, responsible for too many students to give individual attention. "Have you thought about art school?" Robert asked. Ellie closed her sketchbook carefully. "Sometimes, but it's not really practical." "Why not?" he pressed gently. She shrugged, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "It's expensive, and not exactly a stable career path. The best things rarely come with guarantees," Catherine observed. Robert was supposed to be a lawyer. His parents had his whole life mapped out. Prestigious firm, partner by 35, country club membership, the works. Robert grimaced. 2 years into law school, I realized I was absolutely miserable. Dropped out and started a tech company instead. My father didn't speak to me for 8 months. "But now you're rich," Lucy chimed in with a child's blunt assessment. "Lucy!" Catherine admonished, though her lips twitched with suppressed laughter. "Well, he is," Lucy insisted. "That's why we have a big house and Diane who drives us places and why Daddy can help people with his money." An awkward silence fell. Ellie looked down at her sketchbook, acutely aware of the vast economic divide between herself and this family. Lucy's innocent comment had inadvertently highlighted what Ellie had been trying to ignore all evening, that she was a visitor in a world she could never truly belong to. Robert cleared his throat. "What Lucy is inelegantly trying to say is that sometimes taking risks leads to unexpected rewards." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Ellie, your talent deserves to be developed. Would you be open to discussing some possibilities for your future? No pressure, just options you might not have considered." Before Ellie could respond, Lucy yawned hugely beside her, breaking the tension. "I think someone is ready for bed," Catherine said, rising from her seat. "Say goodnight, Lucy." "But I'm not tired," Lucy protested, even as she rubbed her eyes. "I want Ellie to stay." "Ellie needs to go home too," Catherine explained gently. "But perhaps she could visit again soon?" Lucy turned hopeful eyes to Ellie. "Will you? Please?" Looking into that small, earnest face, the face of a child she had pulled from the clutches of the sea just yesterday, Ellie found she couldn't refuse. "Of course I will." After Lucy had extracted a pinky promise regarding Ellie's return and been led off to bed by Catherine, Robert offered to drive Ellie home. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said as they drove through the quiet streets of Crescent Bay. "It meant a lot to Lucy. To all of us, really." "I had a nice time," Ellie replied, surprised to realize how true it was. Despite the moments of awkwardness, despite the awareness of their different circumstances, she had enjoyed herself more than she had in... She couldn't remember how long. "I meant what I said about your artwork," Robert continued. "You have a gift, Ellie, one that shouldn't be constrained by financial limitations." She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Mr. Wells?" "Robert, please." "Robert," she amended. "I appreciate your interest, but you really don't need to." "What if it's not just about you?" he interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "What if sharing your talent is actually a gift you could give to others?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't understand." Robert was quiet for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts. "When I was building my company, I had a mentor who believed in me when no one else did, not even myself. He invested in me, yes, but more importantly, he invested in my potential." He glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "Do you know what he told me when I tried to thank him years later?" Ellie shook her head. "He said, 'The only thanks I need is for you to find someone else whose potential is being wasted and do for them what I did for you.' That's how we change the world, Ellie. One person at a time, one possibility at a time." They had reached her house, but Robert made no move to stop the car. Instead, he pulled over a few houses away, turning in his seat to face her directly. "Catherine and I would like to establish a scholarship for you," he said. "For art school, if that's what you want, or for any educational path you choose. No strings attached, no obligations. Just an opportunity to develop your gifts without the burden of financial worry." Ellie stared at him, speechless. Of all the things she might have expected him to say, this wasn't even on the list. "Why?" she finally managed. "You barely know me." "Because you jumped into freezing water to save our daughter without a second thought," he replied simply. "Because you have extraordinary talent that deserves a chance to flourish. Because Catherine and I have been blessed with resources we believe should be shared, not hoarded." He smiled slightly. "And because Lucy would never forgive us if we let her superhero disappear from her life." Ellie's mind raced, emotions colliding, disbelief, hope, suspicion, gratitude. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Robert assured her. "Think about it. Talk to your father. We can discuss details later." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, offering it to her. "My personal number is on the back. Call anytime." As she walked up the path to her front door, card clutched in her hand, Ellie felt as if she were moving through a dream. The small Cape Cod house looked exactly as it always had, porch light flickering, paint peeling slightly around the windows, her father's old truck in the driveway. But somehow, in the space of 2 days, the world it existed in had shifted. Her father was asleep in his recliner, the TV murmuring quietly in the background. Ellie covered him with the throw blanket from the couch, turned off the TV, and retreated to her room. There, she sat on her bed and stared at Robert's business card for a long time. Robert Wells, CEO, Oceanic Technologies. The name finally clicked in her memory. Oceanic Technologies, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. She'd read about it in her business economics class, which meant Robert Wells wasn't just wealthy, he was wealthy. The kind of wealthy that appeared on magazine covers and founded charitable foundations. And he wanted to give her a scholarship for art school because she had saved his daughter. It was too much to process. Ellie placed the card carefully on her nightstand and pulled out her sketchbook instead. Without conscious thought, her pencil began moving across a blank page, creating a small boat on turbulent waters, a lighthouse beam cutting through darkness, illuminating a path forward. Over the next 3 weeks, Ellie's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The Wells family became a regular presence, invitations to dinner, weekend outings to nearby Portland, quiet afternoons at the clifftop house where Ellie would draw while Lucy played nearby, and Catherine worked on renovation plans for their Boston home. Robert, true to his word, had presented a formal scholarship offer, a fully funded education at the art school of Ellie's choice, plus living expenses and supplies. After initial skepticism and a long, careful conversation with the Wells, Michael Morgan had given his blessing, pride warring with lingering discomfort at accepting such generosity. "You've earned this," he told Ellie one evening as they looked through art school brochures spread across their kitchen table. "Not just by saving their little girl, but by being the person you are, the artist you are." At school, things had changed too. Word had somehow spread about Ellie's rescue of Lucy Wells, and about her connection to the wealthy family now frequently seen around town with Ellie in tow. Tyler's taunts had ceased entirely, replaced by an awkward, mumbled apology one morning by the lockers. Madison had begun acknowledging Ellie in the hallways, even sitting with her at lunch occasionally. Ellie wasn't naive enough to think their change of heart was genuine. She recognized the shallow nature of high school social hierarchies, how quickly fortunes could change based on perceived status or connections. But she found, somewhat to her surprise, that she didn't particularly care about their motivations. Their approval or disapproval no longer defined her world, because her world had expanded. Through the Wells family, she had met artists, gallery owners, designers, people who looked at her work with knowledgeable eyes and offered meaningful critique. Catherine had introduced her to a former colleague who taught at RESD, arranging a preliminary portfolio review that had left Ellie both terrified and exhilarated. And then there was Lucy. Bright, resilient Lucy, who followed Ellie like a shadow whenever she visited, who demanded bedtime stories about ocean adventures, who declared with absolute certainty that Ellie was the best drawer in the whole world, even better than Disney. It was Lucy who now sat cross-legged on the sand beside Ellie, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration as she attempted to copy Ellie's sketch of the lighthouse. November had brought colder temperatures to Crescent Bay, but the day was clear and sunny, perfect for an outdoor drawing lesson. "Mine doesn't look right," Lucy sighed, examining her wobbly rendition. "The light part is too big." "Art isn't about getting things exactly right," Ellie told her, gently adjusting Lucy's grip on the pencil. "It's about seeing the world your own way and sharing that vision with others." Lucy considered this, head tilted thoughtfully. "So my lighthouse isn't wrong, it's just Lucy style." "Exactly," Ellie laughed. "And Lucy style is pretty great." From their spot on the beach, Ellie could see Catherine on the clifftop deck, deep in conversation with Robert, who had returned yesterday from a business trip to San Francisco. They had been talking a lot lately, serious, private conversations that paused whenever Ellie entered the room. Something was happening, some decision being made, but Ellie had resisted the urge to ask questions. Whatever it was, they would tell her when they were ready. That was one thing she had learned about the Wells family. They were direct, honest, and genuine in their affection. The scholarship wasn't charity or a rich family's whim. It was a deliberate investment in her future, offered with respect for her talent and her character. "Ellie?" Lucy's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "When we go back to Boston, will you come visit us?" The question caught her off guard. She had been carefully avoiding thinking about the Wells' eventual departure, about returning to her normal life after this magical interlude. "I hope so," she said carefully. "Maybe during school breaks." Lucy frowned, clearly dissatisfied with this answer. "But that's not enough. I need you to teach me drawing and swimming and how to be brave." "You're already brave," Ellie assured her. "Braver than most grown-ups." "Not like you," Lucy insisted. "You're the bravest person ever." "Daddy says so too." Before Ellie could respond, she noticed Robert and Catherine making their way down the beach path toward them. They were holding hands, faces serious but not unhappy. Whatever decision they had been discussing, it seemed they had reached it. "There's our artists," Catherine called as they approached. "How's the lesson going?" Lucy held up her drawing proudly. "It's Lighthouse Lucy style. It's magnificent," Robert declared, examining the drawing with exaggerated seriousness. "A true original." "Ellie taught me that art is about seeing things your own way," Lucy explained. "Not about being perfect." "Wise words," Catherine said, smiling at Ellie, "and applicable to more than just art." She exchanged a meaningful glance with Robert. "Actually, we were hoping to talk to both of you about something important." Lucy immediately perked up, sensing something significant in her mother's tone. "Is it a surprise? Is it good? Can I guess?" "It's certainly a surprise," Robert said, settling onto the sand beside them. "And we hope it's good, but that partly depends on how you and Ellie feel about it." Ellie felt a flutter of nervousness. What could possibly involve both her and Lucy? Catherine sat down on Lucy's other side, completing their small circle on the beach. "Ellie, you know we'll be returning to Boston soon." Ellie nodded, a familiar heaviness settling in her chest at the reminder. "What you may not know is that we've been discussing a more permanent arrangement regarding your scholarship and education," Catherine continued. "One that would involve a significant change for all of us. We'd like to become your legal guardians, Ellie," Robert said quietly. "With your father's blessing, of course. He would remain an important part of your life, but you would live with us in Boston, attend the art school of your choice, and become part of our family." Ellie stared at them, certain she had misheard. What? We've spoken with your father at length, Catherine explained gently. He loves you deeply, Ellie, and wants what's best for you. He's been struggling financially since the factory downsized, working multiple jobs just to keep your house. When we suggested this arrangement, you living with us, him being able to visit whenever he wants, perhaps even relocating to Boston eventually if he wishes, he thought it might offer you opportunities he simply can't provide right now. You want to adopt me? Ellie managed, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. Legally, it would be guardianship since you're already 17, Robert clarified. But emotionally? Yes, we want you to become part of our family. You'd be my sister, Lucy exclaimed, bouncing with excitement. For real? Forever. Ellie's mind raced, trying to process this unexpected proposal. Live with the Wells? In Boston? Become part of their family? It seemed impossible, like something from one of her drawings, a fantasy world where ignored, bullied girls suddenly found themselves welcomed into loving homes with endless possibilities. I don't understand, she said finally. Why would you want to do this? Catherine reached across Lucy to take Ellie's hand. Because in the short time we've known you, we've come to care for you deeply. Because we see not just your artistic talent, but your kindness, your resilience, your genuine goodness. Because Lucy adores you, and frankly, so do we. And because families aren't just made by blood, Robert added, they're made by choice, by love, by recognizing where you belong together. He smiled slightly. The scholarship offer still stands regardless of your decision about guardianship. This isn't about obligation, Ellie. It's about connection. Lucy, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, leaned against Ellie's side. Please say yes, she whispered. I promise to be the best sister ever. Tears welled in Ellie's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. What about my dad? She managed. He'll always be your father, Catherine assured her. Nothing changes that. He could visit whenever he wants, and you would return here for holidays and summers if you wish. This isn't about taking you away from him. It's about expanding your family, not replacing it. We've discussed the possibility of helping him relocate to Boston eventually, if that's what both of you want, Robert added. There are opportunities there that simply don't exist in Crescent Bay. Ellie wiped at her tears, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they were offering. Not just education and opportunity, but belonging. Family. A place where she was wanted, valued, loved. I need to talk to my dad, she said finally. I need to hear from him directly that he's okay with this. Of course, Robert agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. This is a big decision for everyone involved. That evening, sitting at their small kitchen table, Michael Morgan confirmed everything the Wells had told her. Yes, he had discussed guardianship with them. Yes, he thought it might be the best opportunity for her future. Yes, it had been agonizingly difficult to contemplate letting her go. When your mother left, I promised myself I'd always put you first, he said, his weathered hands curled around a mug of cooling coffee. Sometimes that means making hard choices. The Wells can give you things I just can't, Ellie. Not just material things, but connections, opportunities, stability. But you're my family, Ellie said, her voice cracking. I can't just leave you. You wouldn't be leaving me, kiddo. You'd be moving forward. He reached across the table to cover her hand with his. And I'd be right behind you, cheering you on every step of the way. They said you might move to Boston eventually. He nodded. Robert's been talking to me about job possibilities there. Nothing definite yet, but promising. A small smile crossed his face. Turns out my manufacturing experience might be worth something in the right market. You really think I should do this? Ellie asked, searching her father's face for any sign of doubt or resentment. I think, he said carefully, that life sometimes offers unexpected gifts, and only a fool turns away a gift without at least considering it. He squeezed her hand. The Wells are good people, Ellie. What they're offering comes from the heart, not from obligation. But the decision has to be yours. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at her bedroom ceiling, mind racing with possibilities. Boston, art school, a new family that somehow included her old one. Lucy as a sister, Catherine and Robert as, what? Not parents exactly. She already had those, even if one had abandoned her. But guardians, mentors, something more than friends. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and pulled out her sketchbook instead. Her pencil moved across the page without conscious direction, creating an image of a girl standing at a crossroads, one path leading to a small, familiar house, the other to a city skyline filled with light and possibility. In the drawing, the girl wasn't alone. Figures stood on both paths, arms extended in welcome, no judgment in their postures, no demand that she choose one over the other. Both paths were valid. Both contained love. The realization settled over Ellie like a warm blanket. This wasn't about rejection or replacement. It wasn't even about choosing between two worlds. It was about expansion, of family, of opportunity, of self. 3 days later, with her father by her side, Ellie gave the Wells her answer. Lucy's joyful squeal and flying tackle hug nearly knocked her over. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she embraced first Ellie, then Michael. Robert shook Michael's hand firmly before pulling Ellie into a gentle hug. "Welcome to the family," he whispered. "All of you." In the weeks that followed, plans took shape with surprising speed. Robert's lawyers handled the guardianship paperwork. Catherine arranged for Ellie to visit 3 prestigious art schools in Boston, all of which expressed strong interest in her portfolio. Michael began interviewing for positions at companies Robert had connections with. Through it all, Ellie continued to draw, filling her sketchbook with images of transition and transformation. A lighthouse beam reaching across dark waters, a small boat approaching a welcoming shore, 2 houses connected by a bridge of light. On her last day at Westlake High before the holiday break, and before her permanent transfer to a Boston school in January, Madison Chen approached her in the hallway. "So you're really leaving?" she asked, an unfamiliar uncertainty in her voice. "After New Year's?" Ellie confirmed, waiting for the snide remark, the subtle dig. But Madison just nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I saw some of your drawings. In Ms. Abernathy's classroom. They're really good." "Thanks," Ellie said, surprised by the genuine compliment. "I was thinking," Madison hesitated, "maybe we could stay in touch? I'm applying to colleges in Boston for next fall." 2 months ago, this overture would have meant everything to Ellie. Validation from the girl who had helped make her high school years miserable. Now she found herself simply nodding with a small smile, neither excited nor resentful. "Sure," she said. "That would be nice." Because the truth was, Madison's approval no longer mattered, not because Ellie had found more prestigious friends, but because she had found herself. The girl who had jumped into freezing water to save a drowning child. The artist whose work moved people to tears. The person worthy of love, of opportunity, of family, not because of what she did, but because of who she was. As December wrapped Crescent Bay in winter stillness, the Wells clifftop house became the center of holiday preparations. Lucy insisted on decorating the entire space, including Ellie's newly designated bedroom, with an eclectic mix of handmade paper snowflakes and expensive glass ornaments. Catherine organized a holiday dinner that included Michael, Dr. Winters, who had become a friend to the family, and several local artists whose work she admired. On Christmas Eve, as a gentle snow fell outside the wall of windows, Ellie found herself standing on the deck, watching white flakes disappear into the darker ocean below. The cold air nipped at her cheeks, but she didn't mind. The contrast between the warmth at her back, the house filled with light and laughter, and the vast, mysterious darkness ahead felt right somehow. Symbolic. "Penny for your thoughts?" She turned to find Robert standing in the doorway, holding out a steaming mug of hot chocolate. "Just thinking about everything that's happened," she said, accepting the drink gratefully. "How different my life was 2 months ago." He nodded, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "Life can change in an instant. Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes," he smiled at her, "sometimes for the infinitely better. I keep wondering why," Ellie admitted. "Why me? There are plenty of talented artists in the world. Plenty of kids who need help." "True," Robert acknowledged. "But not all of them jump into freezing water to save drowning children." He was quiet for a moment, watching the snow fall. "You know, when I built my company, everyone told me the key to success was strategic planning. Set goals, follow the map, execute the plan. And there's some truth to that." He turned to face her directly. "But the most important moments in my life, meeting Catherine, deciding to start a family, finding you, none of those came from a strategic plan. They came from being open to the unexpected, from recognizing the value of a connection when it appears. Inside, they could hear Lucy's excited voice as she helped Catherine arrange cookies on a plate for Santa, Michael's deeper tones responding with gentle amusement. 2 months ago, we were strangers, Robert continued. Now we're family, not because of some grand design, but because you were brave enough to act when it mattered, and we were fortunate enough to recognize what a remarkable person you are. Ellie felt tears prick at her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were the kind that came from being seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in her life. Come on, Robert said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Lucy's insisting we all need to be in matching pajamas for the Christmas Eve photo, and I'm pretty sure resistance is futile. Ellie laughed, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. Matching pajamas, huh? Does my dad know about this part of the deal? Oh yes, Robert grinned. His are plaid with little sailboats. Very dignified. As they turned to go inside, Ellie paused for one last look at the snow falling over the ocean. Light meeting darkness, separate elements coming together to create something new and beautiful. Like her life now, not erasing what came before, but transforming it, expanding it into something she could never have imagined. Ready? Robert asked from the doorway. Ellie smiled, feeling the warmth of the house, of her new extended family, calling her home. Ready? She said and stepped inside.